All right, Alexander, we have to talk about the U.S. credit downgrade from AAA to AA plus has been the downgrade. And the most interesting part about this story is that this is a U.S. Credit rating agency. So, I mean, that says a lot. Anyway, what are your thoughts here?
Absolutely, they're all U.S. credit rating agencies. All these agencies are are based in the U.S. And what maybe people don't know is that they actually they actually have a role which is set out in federal law. I mean, I found that amazing when I discovered it, which was during the 2008 financial crisis. But the credit rating agencies, Fitch, Moody's, all of those, they're actually have certain legal rights which are enshrined in U.S. law as to what kind of credit valuations people can make, that they have to take their cue from the credit rating agencies, which has been a very powerful weapon that the United States has been able to use, by the way, because when these these agencies downgrade the credit ratings of other foreign countries, like, for example, in the past, Russia, that deterred US investors from investing in those countries. So just to say, these are sort of semi-formal organizations. But I think the interesting thing about this is, yes, of course, it is important that it was a US credit rating agency that now took the initiative and downgraded the US government's ratings. And I suspect they will all follow, by the way. The other thing is, nobody in the US has really pushed back on this. I remember the last time this happened, briefly, which I think was at the time of the Obama administration. There was a major pushback. The administration argued very, very strongly against it. And eventually the credit rating agencies, they reversed stance. This time, it's been quietly accepted because the facts make it irrefutable. And the other thing that's happened is that the Treasury, the US Treasury, has announced that it's going to increase borrowing to a huge level. I mean, it was expected, I believe, that the quarterly borrowing that it was anticipated it was going to undertake was $250 billion or something on that scale. It's going to actually borrow, or looking to borrow, around $1 trillion. So that reinforces the sense that, credit rating, the US credit rating is becoming precarious. But it also tells us something else, which is that going into the election year, the administration's priority now, the overriding priority, is to avoid a recession. So how do you avoid a recession in the United States? You go on a massive spending spree and you try to keep the economy afloat that way. And that's why the Treasury is stepping up its borrowing. The credit rating agencies are seeing that, which is why they're downgrading US debt worthiness. And we see the extent to which now everything is being decided in the US around the election. Something, by the way, which Donald Trump would not have been able to do. He would never have been allowed to get away with something like this. And of course, which he never even considered doing. I just wanted to say that. So anyway, that's where we are. And of course, the effect of all this additional spending is inevitably going to be more pressure on inflation. So big effort to bring inflation down. The Federal Reserve Board has been raising interest rates and all of that. It's likely that inflation will fall for a few months, but once all this spending really gets underway, sometime over the course of next year, probably towards the second half of next year, we'll start to see the inflation numbers ticking up again. And since I've talked about, interest rate increases in the US, Tom Longo has had a lot to say about that. But one of the things he said to me a couple of weeks ago, which I hadn't really understood, was that he said that there's been an awful lot of price suppression over the last few months, especially in the commodities markets. He said that he expected that oil prices, and Tom Longo is, of course, an expert. I mean, that was his background in oil. He said oil prices would probably start to creep up, and that he sensed that there was actually increasing upward pressure on oil prices, and other prices would also start rising. And certainly in the case of oil prices, that's what we're seeing. Obviously, the Saudi and Russian production cuts are playing a role, but in fact, the pressure for oil prices to grow was already there. And I suspect that this is again connected in some way with a general perception in the markets that the Biden administration is preparing a second big spending splurge.
Obviously, all of this is election related.
Yeah.
So can you go into a bit of the timing to all of this?
Yeah.
Because, they may be able to knock down inflation a bit over the next few months, but you mentioned that in 2024, that inflation is going to start to creep up again. I mean, the timing sounds very, very bad for the Biden campaign if that does happen. So talk a bit about the timing of given the fact that every decision is going to be political.
Absolutely.
From here on out.
I mean, they have a very difficult balance to strike, because on the one hand, the immediate priority is to avoid a recession. And I should say that all the indicators in Europe, at least, are pointing now to a very severe recession. So, we've seen PMI numbers in Switzerland collapse. I mean, manufacturing PMI in Switzerland is now 38. Remember, 50, anything over 50 is expansion, anything below 50 is contraction. We're now 38. That's well into deep contraction territory. And in Germany, it's around 40. I mean, these are very, very bad numbers. I mean, extremely bad numbers indeed. Now, the US has avoided that because the administration has used the Inflation Reduction Act. Remember that? Remember what that was supposed to be all about? In reducing inflation? It was nothing of the sort. What it was all about was providing subsidies, supposedly for green technologies and all of those things to flower across the United States. No real evidence of any of that happening, by the way. What it really was another spending program, and that's kept the US out of recession. So the priority still, I think, is to avoid being dragged down into recession following Europe. Going where Europe is going. They absolutely do not want that in the United States. They don't want people unemployed. They don't want all the difficulties and pressures that happen in an economy when it is in recession. And they certainly don't want people coming out and being angry over the fact that the economy is in a recession and voting for the Republican nominee, who is most likely going to be Donald Trump, despite all of the legal challenges that they're bringing. So, on the one hand, they want to stop a recession. But, of course, in order to do that, they're trying to reflate the economy. They're trying to pump money into the economy to keep it going. And putting aside the long-term damage that will probably do to the US, I mean, if you pump up the economy with funds, you create a large amount of extra demand that will probably suck in imports, which will ultimately erode your industrial base, all of those kind of things. But if you do that, especially given, as I said, that there are recessionary pressures that you're trying to counter, the risk is that you're going to see inflation start to take off again, and they don't want that to happen too soon. They don't want to see that happening in the summer. they probably would prefer to see that happen in the last quarter of 2024, when the election is out of the way. So, they got a difficult thing to pull off. We'll see whether they can. They might be able to. They might fail. But even if they fail, even if we see a tick up in the inflation numbers in the summer, I suspect that they probably calculate that they can get by with a bit of extra inflation, but that they can't survive a recession. So the priority is to prevent a recession at all costs. And if there's a little more inflation in the summer, well, they'll find a way to explain that away, as they always do. They'll blame Mr. Putin. They'll say it was all his fault. The fact that he cancelled the grain deal and cut oil production is transitory. It's transitory, exactly.
Yeah. You got to wonder how much longer they can keep this thing going. I mean, and even if they lose the election, like say the Democrats were to lose to Trump, then they can dump all of this on the Trump White House if that was to come about.
That's absolutely the calculation. So, I mean, if in a kind of way, it's a win-win thing. If they win, then of course Biden gets re-elected, or if not Biden, some other Democrat, whatever. They retain control of the White House. They retain control of, well, they hope at least one part of Congress or some parts of Congress. So they're still in control. They can then see off Trump once and for all, see off the real challenge that he represents, arrange with their friends in the Republican Party for the rhinos to consolidate control of the Republican Party, stabilize the political situation. That's probably the calculation. If they win, it's okay. If there's a recession, if there's inflation, all those things, well, we can deal with that. If Trump wins, perish the thought, well, he's got the problem then. And we blame him for it. We can say, we were managing everything so brilliantly but the moment Trump is elected, there's this total collapse of confidence. Nobody wants to see the orange man back. And we can see that the markets have gone crazy and inflation is spiking and production is falling. And that's what you get when you vote for Donald Trump.
Okay, we'll see if they can pull it off.
Well, indeed.
They have the media on their side. So
they have the media on the side. And
that's a good start.
And that's absolutely it is. I mean, that is their big advantage. Can I just say, it's their only real advantage in an election. I mean, if the media were more evenly balanced in the United States, we would have a completely different political picture going forward. I mean, if there was real open debate about all of these things, the kind of things we've just been saying on this programme would be said much more widely, and people would be far more aware of what was going on. So the media helps them. I mean, it helps them to an extraordinary degree. It is their race, and they play it for all it's worth.
Yep, that is very, very true. All right, theduran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, ODYSEE, BitChute, Telegram, and RockFit, and go to the Duran shop, 10% off. Use the code. Good day. Take care.